alle herzlich willkommen hier in zu unserem ECM-Diskurs. Ich werde jetzt alles stumm schalten, weil wir so ein bisschen viele Nebengeräusche haben, aber fühlt euch nicht verstummt. Wir haben auch einen Chat, wenn es Fragen gibt, immer jederzeit gerne reinschreiben, den werde ich verfolgen. Und es gibt im Anschluss auch noch genug Zeit, dann auch direkt Fragen zu stellen.
Hello, welcome everybody who joins us for another event in the ECM Discourse series. This is a series that is dedicated to topics related to exhibitions, curating and mediating art and beyond that. And we are so very happy to welcome tonight as our guest lecturer, Julia Grosse. Julia Grosse is an artistic director, co-founder and artistic director of Contemporary and, a dynamic and platform comprising publications Contemporary and Magazine and Contemporary and America Latina Magazine, as well as Contemporary and Projects and Contemporary and Education. So it's a platform that is very much aiming at giving visibility and also being a platform for discourse around global art production, I would say. Julia Grosse is a lecturer at the Institute for Art and Context at the University of the Arts in Berlin. She studied art history, German literature, and media studies, and she worked as a columnist and art journalist in London and for the daily Tageszeitung, for Frankfurter Allgemeine Sonntagszeitung, Architectural Digest, and for the Süddeutsche Zeitung. She has published articles in various art publications and co-edited books, and her publication Ein Leben lang, published in 2018, was also very much well received. In 2020, she curated Friendly Confrontations, a festival for global art and institutional critique at the Kammerspiele in München. And just yesterday, together with Yvette Mutumba, the other founder of Contemporary and, she received the European Culture Manager of the Year award that was given to the founders and directors of Contemporary and so congratulations to you, Julia, and we're so very happy to have you with us tonight. Your talk is entitled Beyond Countering the Canon, a digital art magazine as a platform for global contexts and discourses. And it's very much related to questions that we are dealing with for many, many years. So it's so great to have you with us. And I just hand over to you, and I'm looking forward to your presentation and of course also to the discussion afterwards. We have the possibility to have a Q&A afterwards, and also a discussion with everybody who's here with us tonight. Thank you for being with us.
Oh, thanks so much for the invitation, first of all. And yeah, thanks, to all the visitors or audience, or, people who want to join us tonight, etc. And I was wondering, would you share the screen now, or should I? Maybe because the first slide is quite formal, a bit boring maybe, but yeah, maybe. That's cool. Oh yeah, of course. Now that's perfect. So yeah, thanks again for the invitation. And the funny thing is that I was supposed to give this talk 6 months ago, physically in person, which never happened, obviously, because it was 3 days prior to the first big fat lockdown, and so that didn't happen. And I'm still super happy that I'm here tonight anyway, not in person, but like this. I might pop out for a second, maybe in 10 minutes, to get some water, because because normally, when you do a panel or give a talk, somebody's putting water here, and I just didn't think about anything today. So yeah, I'm super happy to be here, and thanks, Luisa, for the nice introduction. As she said, I'm Julia. I'm together with Yvette Mutumba, the co-founder and artistic director of Contemporary and, which we always kind of define as a dynamic platform, kind of bringing together different layers of activities around contemporary art practice from Africa and the global diaspora. That's how we kind of define it. And what you can see here is the landing page of the website or the magazine we have, because we have two magazines, Contemporary and Magazine, which you see here, and another one, Contemporary and America Latina magazine, which I'm just quickly talking about a bit later. And we have a big relaunch right now. So what you see here is kind of old, so everything will look nicer next week, because because when we started 2013, we had this idea to mainly create or start establish a platform that makes artistic production from Africa and the global diaspora more visible, but also connect these artistic producers and voices from these areas in order to creating a constantly growing network of voices and perspectives in a way. And since then, let's say, because we started as a magazine, we kind of, I don't know, broke loose, not, but developed many arms of different activities which go way beyond the pure digital activities now, because we do many things on the ground as well, or physically, and I'll just talk about them in a second. So that's why what you see here is the website, but what we have, like, hopefully in 10 days from now is more broader and showing the different areas of what we do from you know, projects, digital projects, but as well physical projects. And you know, of course, you know, the idea to launch a magazine with this focus on contemporary art from Africa and the global diaspora is nothing new. So we didn't reinvent the wheel in a way. You had, for example, Revue Noire, maybe you've heard of this publication in the 90s, focusing on the diaspora and African art production as well. And you still have NKA or NKA from the US, more like a very academic journal, and founded by Okwe Invisor and Salah Hassan, to name just a few. But compared to, for example, examples such as NKA, who are very academic, which is fantastic, in a way, our approach is more the opposite or completely different, because with CN, the aspect of accessibility is the very bottom line, if you like, and that happens on many levels in our work. Accessibility is, for example, in terms of being readable as an online platform from all over the globe and beyond physical, let's say, distribution limitations. So if you're a magazine, for example, Frieze magazine, you can't assure that Frieze magazine is in the library of the art school in Addis Ababa, for example, because it isn't. You know, it never reaches the library of the art school in Addis Ababa. And this is why we, from the beginning on, in terms of accessibility, decided to say, okay, we have to do, or we have to go online in order to be, you know, to be read or consumed from all different perspectives and all different parts of the globe. Sorry, having said that, all our produced contents, interviews, features, essays, etc., are free. You know, as most of our readers are rather young, which is great, in the early to mid 20s, late 20s as well. And yeah, that makes us very proud that we don't have, you know, any paywalls for the content we produce. And as well, accessibility is important when it comes to the content itself. In our, let's say, features, essays, etc., we consciously try to bring complex topics across, but really try to explain them in an understandable way that, let's say, a broader global audience can understand what we want to bring across. You know, even though topics sometimes are very complex, cultural, political context, context around post-colonial debates and discourse, etc. But we always try to, or you know, not force, but try to convince our writers to keep it simple, which is very tricky in terms of writing, to to bring context or complex contexts across in a simple way, but this is something we find super important. And since we launched in 2013, the initial idea of an art magazine has grown into, as I said, a whole cosmos in a way, with a publication, and we as well have sections such as CN projects and other areas called CN education, but I come to this later. Maybe what I might find interesting or important to explain is the, let's say, the meaning behind the term CN, because we use CN in the sense of that for us, an artist is primarily contemporary in the first place, and maybe from Ghana with parents in London or gallery in Milan, etc. Means that we don't use geographical info in order to describe an artist and his or her practice. Because very often when it comes to, let's say, geographical info of an artist, you start to immediately open a box. Yeah? So for example, Okwe Envisa was one of very popular examples where he lived in, he might have come from Nigeria, fine, but he lived in the US and in Germany for decades. But still, the media referred to him as the Nigerian or African curator. And this is something we just want to overcome, this tendency to always grab the geographical info when it comes to certain, or to artists from certain areas. Yeah, you would never say, oh, Gerhard Richter, the European artist, or the German artist, maybe, but no, you just read Gerhard Richter and not the German artist or the European artist Gerhard Richter, and this is something we find very important to make this point. And that's why we call it contemporary end. And another thing is that the idea of art from Africa or the African artist is something for us that just doesn't exist, because in a way what connects an artist, a painter from Joburg with a concept artist from, I don't know, from Ghana with an Egyptian performance artist who lives in London. Yeah, conceptually probably nothing at all, and yet there's this, let's say, tendency to put their practices in a box, by getting out this label African art or African artist, etc. And this is something we have been working on in our practice at Contemporary, and by not avoiding these words, but rather going beyond these ideas behind these words, if that makes sense, what I'm saying. Because, for example, what we try to not mention, or we just don't mention it, are these very, let's say, inflationary used terms, such as right now, obviously, decolonialism. This is something we kind of practice in this way, but we don't name it all the time, yeah? Because it's funny, every library, every curriculum, every museum, every festival right now is trying to decolonize itself, yeah? This is this funny tendency we see around us a lot, and we rather, I don't know, we'd rather try to move beyond these boxes and by simply acting by it, and rather not naming it or put a title over the practice we're doing. Maybe can you go to slide 3? This is us, a group picture of the core team of the end, but obviously not all of us, because it's a global network of dozens of writers, artists, curators who work with us on a daily basis. And even that group you see here is not entirely based in Berlin. Some are in Colombia, another one is in London, another one in the south of Germany, for example. But because, there's as well sometimes a tendency to say, oh, where's your magazine from, or the platform, where does it sit? Is it from Berlin? And we always say, obviously the platform is there where the network is, and the network is there. It's all over the place. And it's, in Ghana, in Nigeria, in the US, in France, in Germany, etc. And and this is something we find very important when it comes to describing what the CN network is. Interesting as well is that the the audience or the readers are very global as well. We have readers from over 150 countries. Funny enough, the main readership is from the US since the beginning. We never really found out why, but the Americans just obviously love ideas, Black Americans, about Africa as well as the motherland, etc. So for them, it's like a treasure island to see what we're covering, you know, or you know, the new artists we're featuring, etc. For them, it is very fascinating. We get this feeling. So, and maybe the next slide, not slides, the next slide. This is, yeah, again, the magazine. As you see, it functions more or less like a classical art magazine with features, interviews, essays, columns, daily news, exhibitions from literally, you know, all over the world. Maybe the next slide. Yes. Having said that, from all over the world, we produce, like other magazines, you know, of course, daily contents around contemporary art, but with a small, but for us important difference that if we talk about the art world, quote unquote, we obviously don't refer to a small, or, you know, the small usual suspect circle of New York, London, Berlin, Paris, Amsterdam, Basel, LA, etc. But we're looking truly for global perspectives, or what's really happening on a global scale. And let's say, don't want to divide art scenes into the West and the rest. And that's why our events come from London or Berlin, but they also come from Nairobi or Joburg or Lagos or Dar es Salaam. And this is something that we have been missing reading for a long time in other art publications, and in a way that kind of encouraged us to start with CN, because we kind of missed this broader idea that if I want to read, for example, a review from a show running in London, that's fine, I can read it. But obviously there are shows running in Dar es Salaam or in Khartoum or in Nairobi too. Why isn't there a magazine that brings all these different perspectives and positions together? And why can I find them in magazines, in art publications? And that was kind of one trigger in a way 7 years ago why we started with the end, to kind of fill a gap of things in art productions who obviously were there. So maybe the next one we have. Oh, can you go one? Oh no, the one before. Yes, that one is cool. We have established shorter and longer running series on topics and discourses which do not necessarily find their way into, let's say, other art magazines, as they may seem too marginal. I just want to present a few. For example, this year, due to the various eruptions we all experienced, we started several spontaneous series that reacted to the current situation. And what you're looking at here is the series #Museum Shutdown, a kind of, let's say, intensive picture gallery from the closed museums exhibitions, which was one of the, on the one hand, like a solid act of solidarity with museums and art spaces from Joburg to Berlin, etc. But it was also a nice offer to the readers, because, you know, they couldn't visit the museums and art spaces either. So by offering these walks around the shows, they at least became an idea what was behind closed doors at the moment. And this is Duro Olowu, for example, at the MCA in Chicago. And the next one, the next one is in Florence, Villa Romana, in a work by Sonia Elizabeth Barrett. And that series was quite popular, and we just started to show it again as the museums, for example, in Germany are closed again. In Vienna, they closed as well, right? The museums, yeah. So that's why, you know, we started with this series again. The next slide, please. Another series which ran over several weeks called We Are, launched with the intention to give especially creators from POC perspectives in the US a space for their voice and their, you know, feelings in a way as well, because it was at a very early stage or time of eruptions after the murder of George Floyd and others. And we invited different, let's say, MoMA curators, new to the scene artists, renowned artists, poets, senior professors like Deborah Willis, to leave like short or long or very emotional statements on this kind of wall of voices, that's how we called it. And the next slide, please. Slide. What did I say? Yeah, thanks. And as well, we also consciously during that time, and still, that's what we're still doing, opened the platform to give groups and individuals, let's say, a space or platform to speak out, to publish open letters to museums or yeah, petitions and different formats to just, I don't know, say what they want or leave their voice. And this, what you're looking here at, maybe some of you saw it as well, is an open letter from Swiss Black culture producers addressing the Swiss cultural institutions and institutes. And for example, we had an open letter by young woman, Afro-German woman addressing a large museum in Leipzig where she experienced forms of racism in her time during when she was an intern there. And we had the feeling that one could literally feel that individuals like her, for example, suddenly, I don't know, felt to have enough backup and courage to stand up, to express themselves, and, you know, at the same time know that their voice is finally or has been heard or is heard right now. So that was or still is quite important to us to kind of open or offer the platform as a space where people can just voice their feelings and the things important to them. The next slide. What we also find very important is to make a look back, let's say, into the past events and discourses, which is for us an important tool to show that contemporary art from African perspectives obviously isn't something that has just popped up 20 years ago with Okwui Invesor's Documenta 10 or with Jean-Hubert Martin's Magicien de la Terre in 1989. But obviously art histories have, you know, existed outside the West as well. And there are many art histories and not one art history that we're telling or that we're teaching. And for example, when I studied art history, which is a long time ago, so like 12 years ago, for me it was clear there's an avant-garde, there's modernism, there's art history. But when I thought of an avant-garde, you know, that happened or took place in Paris, in Berlin, in New York, etc., yeah, because nobody taught me at my institute in Bochum, which was quite advanced, but nobody taught me that obviously there are dozens of avant-gardes in the world, yeah, and to kind of unlearn this took me, I don't know, many years as well to unlearn that there are many avant-gardes and many art histories and many modernisms. And that's why, you know, this kind of series where we look back and look back in history to see, okay, there are, you know, many forms of collectives, avant-garde collectives who worked, I don't know, in Senegal in the 60s, in the 50s, in the 40s. You know, to make this visible is quite important to us. Finally, and then I close the chapter about the series. And the next slide, please. Finally, I just want to quickly talk about a very popular series. It doesn't look so glamorous now, but it's quite popular with our readers. It's called Inside the Library. and here we do present rather smaller or unknown libraries around the globe, and kind of invite them to present, their very rare and sometimes fantastic collection of art books, pamphlets, fanzines, monographs, which you obviously wouldn't necessarily find at the British Library or at the Stabi, Staatsbibliothek, etc. And what we want to bring across here, that there are hidden places who hold a huge, deep knowledge too, and outside the usual suspect big places who claim to have, to inherit all the knowledge, but these places have an important knowledge, obviously too, and that's why, with great pleasure, we love to invite and find, first of all, find and invite these little libraries to open their treasure chests in a way. And the next slide. Yes, this is another arm of our activities, because we started, as I said, as a digital magazine, but always, had a fetish for print, as maybe all of you have. We all love print, and obviously we always thought maybe alongside the online platform, it would be nice to have something physical to go alongside. And we introduced our first print issue in 2014 during the Dakar Biennale. And that was, that's what we've been doing ever since, like publishing 2 print issues per year, always alongside an existing art event, if it takes place around the globe. Documenta, Berlin Biennale, Kampala Biennale, Sao Paulo Biennale, etc. And as I said, why print? Because for us, it is still important to kind of reach certain local communities on the spot. For example, if we are in Dakar, or if we are even in Kassel or in Kampala, and communities who would not necessarily come from art scenes or art contexts or from the art sector, but who are still interested in art. And even though many art festivals, especially the Biennales, very often must feel like UFOs, invading a community or a city, for us it's always important to, if we have these magazines, to distribute them out, of course, inside the Biennale or whatever the event is, but outside as well. And what we do, we always obviously translate the issues into the language spoken in the respective country. We would, of course, let's say, never ever produce a print issue for the Sao Paulo Biennale, like the one in the center here, and produce it in English, because most of the people or the Brazilians don't speak necessarily English. So of course we would produce it in Portuguese, and this is something we find very very important, to have these local languages represented in the magazine, even though of course they're colonial languages, because Portuguese is not the original language in Brazil, but still this is what we do. For example, this is the actual the actual print issue we just launched some weeks ago, and the idea is always, that's why it looks so upside down, to have at least 2 languages in one issue, and in this case it is Portuguese and Spanish. And this is always how we design it, as a flip issue. The next slide, please. Yes, what we find super important, obviously, as a network, is to team up and to collaborate with other initiatives. And here, that was on the occasion of the Sao Paulo Biennale. I just mentioned the issue in the middle of the many issues you just saw. And we worked with a very great Brazilian, Black Afro-Brazilian culture initiative. It's called Omenelik, who focus rather on Black Brazilian literature, but it was amazing to produce this issue together with them. And we hosted a party in the busy opening week of the Biennale in Sao Paulo. And we had a big event right in the center of the city, together with like 400 Afro-Brazilian art workers, artists, etc. And many of them came to us afterwards and said, "Oh, that was a very rare occasion that us as part of the Afro-Brazilian art scene, had an event of such scale right in the center." Of Sao Paulo, because normally we would do these parties or events in the periphery, far outside the dominating, very, very exclusive art circle. And because artistic production of, in this case, Afro-Brazilian perspectives is almost and still invisible and in the dominant white Brazilian art circle or art world. And this doesn't get, let's say, better in other Latin American countries. For example, in Peru, people told us, when we started researching there, because we feature we feature Afro Latin American topics from these different areas. And we were in Peru, and people from the art world there told us, "Oh, it's great that you're interested in Afro-Peruvian art, but we don't have any Afro-Peruvian artists here," which is obviously not true at all, because we are in contact with them, and they have a small network, but they're there. And this is something which left us really frustrated, these different kind of feedbacks, because we could see that our readers literally inhaled articles featuring Afro-Latin American art topics and discourses, etc. And that kind of we gave it a little thought, and talked to different funders, such as the Goethe Institute, for example, and the IFA, this is the Institute for Auslandsbeziehungen. And it took us 2 more years to convince them to launch another magazine focusing on Afro-Latin American and Caribbean art perspectives in relation to Africa. And maybe the next slide. Yes, and that launched in we launched CN America Latina in 2018 in 3 languages, Spanish, Portuguese, and English, to really reach a broader audience, not mainly in Latin America, but obviously in Latin America as well. What is interesting now when it comes to the readership of CNRL, this is the short form, is that still Americans are the main readers, which is funny. But the interesting thing is these American readers read the publication in Spanish. Means that many Latinx, so Latin Americans who live in the US read the magazine, and this is super interesting for us. And thanks to dirty Google analytics, we can all get these informations out. And maybe another thing, because I just mentioned it comes out in 3 languages, important to us is the aspect of translations, because for example, we would not have a text in Brazilian Portuguese translated into English by, for example, a Portuguese translator sitting in Lisbon. Why? Because of course, colonial Portuguese is very different in detail from Brazilian Portuguese. And we don't want to, let's say, iron out these important subtleties in these different shades of language. So this is why, you have to, in a way, you never do it right. But if you at least do it a little bit right, you have to go all the way and say, okay, we want, I don't know, an article from a Black Brazilian person. But if we have someone, as I said, from Portugal to translate it, they would say, okay, this word, I don't know, this word is different. And they would just take them out. And this is something we obviously don't want, because for us, the different, not tastes, colors and styles of the language is extremely important. But yeah, I come to this in a second. The next slide. The aspect, I mentioned it already earlier, of education is quite important to us as well in our work at SCN. At the end, the aspect of education as a shared tool has always played an important role, both in terms of content and in topics related to, let's say, aspects of unlearning, meaning, let's say, the conscious unlearning of internalized exclusive art discourses, etc. I just mentioned it in, from my own experience with the different art, or not the different, just the one art history and the one avant-garde, etc. And here, for example, we dedicated ourselves entirely to education in a print edition, edition that we produced together with the uneducation team of the Documenta 14 in 2017. And in our practice at CN, we also have a huge focus on, the aspect of education when it comes to our content and our critical writing itself. The next slide, please. Yes. So starting in 2016, with the help of several funders, the biggest funding we received was from the Ford Foundation, the American foundation. Thanks to that, we were able to realize various critical writing workshops in Africa and the diaspora. This one you see here was 2016 in Lagos. We had other ones in Nairobi, in Lubumbashi, Democratic Republic of Congo, in Kampala, which is in Uganda, in Rwanda, which is in Angola, but it's also in Detroit in the US. And the idea was, and still is, because they're still running, to invite young writers who are, let's say, interested in focusing more on critical art writing and to work together for several days in a workshop with senior writers from the respective regions. Right now, obviously, we can't do these. We do them purely digital now, but normally in the past, we did them, physically, obviously, and brought these different groups together. What they do, classical text work, but as well, talk about topics such as finding your own voice, where do I publish, should I start a blog, how would I pitch an article, etc. And what we definitely never wanted to do is, let's say, fly in international journalists in order to impose the perfect feuilleton writing style on young artists from Kampala or Rwanda. That was never, in our interest. That's why we always focused on local voices, local senior journalists who, have this deep knowledge of the respective cultural context and understand the writing style of the youngster writers as well, because every style is different. And what we don't have, for example, deliberately, we don't have an in-house style at the end, like New York Times and Der Spiegel, this kind of sound that runs through all the text and which is so recognizable at once, one text, one and, all the others. And what drives us is to find their own voice in the young writers. And in a way, our in-house style is to not have an in-house style, but rather to celebrate the diversity of these different writers and styles. Because, if you, and we had to learn this as well, if you read an article by a young writer from Kampala, it sounds pretty different from the, the feuilleton style reviews, from, for example, from a German perspective. But even the Kampala style review sounds very different from a text written by an art writer from Cairo, because maybe the piece from writers in Uganda who write about art sound more decorated, they use more ornamental language, etc. And we had to get used to this as well. And since we just realized how rich it is to have these different colors of voices, we feel very liberated, because it would not be an alternative to iron, all these different layers of language out, because it's very unique and we're very proud about these different styles. The next one, please. Oh yeah, this is was a workshop in Nairobi with a great group. I sound like I wanted to say tremendous, like Trump, with a fantastic group. And the great thing is, and this is very important to us, that the writers themselves can develop a practice and ideally, can also earn money with their writing, or maybe even enough to live off this. But this is not very realistic, because most of them do many things at the same time, maybe curate as well, or are photographers at the same time. But the idea is that we kind of help them in their practice in order to publish more and write for national and maybe even international media. And what we feel is super extremely precious right now is that we have never worked, and especially not now, but will never work with reporters, so-called parachute journalists, who kind of jump off in Dakar for 3 days in order to report on the Dakar Biennale and then, fly back to London or wherever they are. Because what we've been doing for the last 7 years is really relying on local voices, writers, and their, as I said, deep knowledge, which they have, developed because they live there, they come from that area. And this is how we developed our precious networks with these local correspondents. It took a lot of time. It took 7 years to grow, but with the overall idea behind this slow way of building these local structures was really to telling your own story from a local perspective, and which is now with the pandemic even more telling and relevant. We have the opinion, or we think. And the next slide, please. Yes, and as an addition to these workshops, who obviously end after 3 days, they're over, and then in the worst case you never see them again, because everybody goes after his or her business, etc. And that's why we kind of established a long-term working relationship with some of these young writers. We call it the mentoring program, in which the selection of them continue to work with their mentors for another year, writing or producing 1 text per month, for which we pay a small stipend or a small fee. And the idea behind this mentoring program is that we, in a way, want to encourage the youngster writers to go into this job of critical writing, and in a way use this job as well as a tool for freedom of speech or freedom of expression, in a way, because because maybe the thing is that the problem is we want to encourage them to go into this job and use journalism as a tool, or critical writing, art writing in this case, as a tool, because being a journalist in many of the world's countries, not only African countries, comes with a price, or can be risky, and because apart from the financial insecurity, because you can't live off writing in cities such as Lagos, for example, in some countries there's of course also this issue of censorship, a big thing, and which can even hit an art writer who, for example, reports a bit too positively about a queer photography exhibition in the city of Dakar, for example, and can really get him or herself in minor or major trouble. And in one of our workshops, for example, in Kampala in Uganda, we had that case that a person from the Secret Service was sitting in the last row, just simply to intimidate us and kind of, over watching what we're doing, because, as soon as it's headlined with critical writing, there's this suspicion in terms of, what we're doing, how are we teaching you know, freedom of speech, which in some countries obviously isn't wished, let's say. So what we do, because we want to, you know, deliberate the writers, but we want to protect them at the same time as well. We talk to them, we advise them and connect them with many initiatives and NGOs who work in that field around artist safety and freedom of expression in African cities as well. So they're not all sitting at the UN in New York, etc., but they're sitting in the different African countries. And of course, we give them support as a platform as well. So here you can see a reportage that 2 workshop participants from Ethiopia wrote for us about a cultural music venue in Addis Ababa. And they mentioned in the text that drugs are used, you know, consumed in the venue. And this led to massive pressure that was put on the 2 writers by the institution, or by this events institution. So we, of course, you know, took the 2 out of this pressure zone, let's say, and discussed and negotiated the whole process directly with these organizers. And this is extremely important to us if our writers need help, because, you know, they want to write critically. We can offer them a certain kind of, protection and support if necessary, with lawyers, etc. Because, you know, it's so important to, you know, that the job of, or the profession of the journalist or culture journalist doesn't get something young people don't want to do anymore because it's too dangerous or just not attractive. That's why we kind of really are on the case here. The next slide is, yes, this is another on the ground project we're doing. A quite busy project. It's called the Sea and Center of Unfinished Business. It's a reading room or kind of walk-in bookcase structure, which offers visitors a very diverse and sometimes a little bit irritating selection of books in a way like focusing on, in the widest sense, blind spots of colonial power relations, which continue, you know, to still impact science and society today. The thing is, while we might focus on traces of legacies of colonialism in the center, what we weren't interested in when we started this was to, let's say, create a rather academic, inaccessible handapparat of usual suspect titles around colonialism, post-colonialism, decolonialism, etc. And rather open this up to a broader audience who can access this, again, this idea of accessibility. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, this is the same structure as you can see. This is at the HKW in Berlin. And we were invited by the Transmediale, the digital festival, always taking place in January, to install and show us our center here. And this is the original structure we have been we didn't build this, but we designed it together, or we created it together with a young design group. And this is it's not heavy, it's very light, and this can travel to, I don't know, to different places. It has been traveling to different places and museums, but we have different shapes and forms and shades of the center as well. So it's not always this kind of construction you see here. Yes, and this is a smaller version in Dresden. This is right now at the Lipsiusbau in Dresden right now as part of the Angela Davis exhibition, which is unfortunately closed right now. But as you see, this is more like a smaller smaller residency, that's how we call it, if there are smaller versions of the original structure, but still obviously with the same idea. And it's important for us that it's always an encounter between us and the institution we are meeting, which means that we bring our books, obviously, but the institutions, need to open their library up to us as well, so that we can go into their books and get out books from their collection, which become part of the exhibited center during the time of the exhibition, obviously, you know, as a kind of a critical and playful and sometimes irritating dialogue as well, because we had very funny moments, for example, with the case of the Transmediale, you just saw the picture, that we went through the books of their collection of the Transmediale. And the funny thing is that 90% of their books were focused on early 2000 net culture topics written by old white Dutch men. Yeah, and that was really funny. And we thought, okay, obviously we don't leave these books out, but we take them, and not all of them, but you know, a selection of 30 of them, and put them into the structure in order to create a dialogue with the books we have. And that notion of, let's say, irritation is good and very important, because as it reflects a focus of interest or inclusive or exclusive tendencies, which we are not shy to show, let's say. The next slide, please. Yes, here you have a selection of these books, which maybe from first sight wouldn't match really. And as I said, we're rather interested in the question how intensively colonial legacies still bleed in all parts of today's society. And that thought kind of opened a whole new world of possibilities for us when it came to, you know, what kind of books should we bring together? Because in a way, everything is impacted by colonial oppression. You know, that's why we have books on Wall Street, on expressionist art, on fashion, on pop culture. You know, even the good old Gombrich history of art has its place in our center. You can see it here on the left. And people were like, oh, why is the Gombrich here? What you know, what has it to do here? And the thing is, obviously, Gombrich is important because, you know, it claims to tell the history of art, and obviously it doesn't tell us the history of art. It is full of blanks, and these blanks tell a story, you know, because they don't tell a story, they tell us a story. And that's why exactly these blanks are of big interest for us. And that's why good old Gombrich is part of our collection as well. As you can see, you know, a book by Queen Latifah, and to put them next to each other is obviously big fun to us. Yeah, you can go to the next one. This is another example. These two are this picture you see is from the exhibition which just closed some weeks ago at the Museum Ludwig in Köln, where we had this center in a big version installed as well. And let's say through this openness when it comes to the selection of books, the center is very accessible, as I said. This is super important to us, and absolutely non-didactic, because this is very key to us too, because we don't want to teach anyone entering the center, yeah. Or what we are rather interested in is educate through irritation in the widest sense. You know, why is this book here? Why is this book next to that one? I don't understand why are they here? And the idea is as well that we install them in the first step. This is our curatorial step, maybe the first laying hands on the books, putting them in a very associative order together. And then we leave it to the visitors who come throughout the weeks and months to take them out and rearrange as they wish. And because that creates very, very interesting and irritating, or I don't know, surprising combinations and associations again. And we think that through this kind of narration or narrating a story, people get a feeling for what we want to say way better, because it's non-didactic but more associative and associative, and still people get a slight idea how, you know, colonial traces or legacies are still, you know, have an impact on all these different areas of society which are reflected in the books. What we don't have as well, because we're not a library, we are a reading room, That's why we don't have a handout bibliography of the titles. And we don't sum titles in corners, like A for Africa in one corner, etc. But really, play with the impact of associations and irritations when you see these books in order. The next slide, please. Yeah, this is another example of the mixture of books. Next, please. Yes, and as we never, the thing is we install the center, but we never really, it's a fully participative hands-on reading room in which, grassroots initiatives can meet, students can work, visitors can just come and read. But, we never know in a way. Of course, we can see what people used and where they put books, etc. But we wanted to kind of trace, or at least think how they used, or get an idea how they used the library. And that's why we started with these, just stupid post-it ideas, and just put some piles there and pens, and such as, tell us what you think, leave a mark, say something, yeah, if you like. And that kind of has exploded during the last 1.5 years, and we obviously love it. Here you can see some post-its at the HKW, where they, where people left messages and comments, etc. Can you go to the next one, please? Yeah, this is in Cologne, where people, as you can see, kind of went a little bit wild, and that was when the museum opened again some weeks after the lockdown, and we had the feeling that people were like, "Oh, I wanted to," I don't know, just exploded. And the next one, yes, this is the structure in Cologne, made out of wood, and we love these posters because they are fantastic and simple tool, and a voice or a trace which says, we think a lot about how the visitors are using the center, what are they reading, which translations which books they might find problematic, maybe, yeah, which book they hate, other books they love, which books they're missing in the collections, etc. And they leave all these comments, and this is for us is very precious, and we still don't know what to do with these posters, but obviously we're collecting them since we started this. And many of these sketches, or many do sketches, obviously, because they find themselves in a museum, but often even these posters get in dialogue with each other and start to comment on others, etc. And yeah, and this structure, as you can see at the end of the exhibition, was really covered in these post-it and looked more like a holy shrine or a spiritual temple, where all the tourists come and put something. So it looked a bit ridiculous, but we still thought it's amazing. The next slide. As I mentioned, we do the smaller iterations of the center as well. And this is at the school in your city, in Vienna. Some of you, or many of you, might recognize the amazing purple floor. And what we sometimes do, and I'm looking forward to do it tomorrow, first time digitally as well, with the master students as well here at ECM, are reading exercises in the different centers here. We did this session at school in the Herrengasse, and yeah, please go there if you haven't been, but I'm sure almost all of you know it anyway. And the idea of these exercises is to do a big out loud reading together, but in a very associative way again. So everybody has, I don't know, 10 to 15 minutes to pick a book from the library and read out loud a short passage from it. Can be some sentence, can be, I don't know, a half page, followed by the next person who feels that her passage, maybe from her book, works nicely, or maybe it's irritating, and that's why it fits nicely. And the beautiful thing about this session, and we did this first time together with the education team of the Documenta, the nice thing about it is that it creates this, I don't know, this beautiful alternative narration, which kind of creates, no, not creates, it kind of fills these gaps I was just talking about. Because by doing this together, this selecting and listening and reading, it creates this kind of alternative and very narration, and we do this together, and this is very beautiful. And the discussions coming out of this after the reading are very beautiful as well. So I'm very curious how this is going to work tomorrow when we do it digitally, because the idea tomorrow is that the students, the master students, pick books from their personal library, which I will do as well. I just do like this and take a book from this shelf. So, and then, or two. Let's see. Maybe we do 2 rounds. But yeah, we've never done this digitally and with the shelves of the person, of their private shelves. So let's see what kind of narrations we're going to create tomorrow. So. What time is it? Do we still have? What time? When did we start? At 7. Oh God! Did I speak an hour? How long did?
Julia, we still have till 8:30, so we still have like 25 minutes.
Cool. No, because cool, perfect.
But it would be great to have time for questions.
Yeah. Let me just wrap this up in 4 minutes, because I want to just quickly introduce a project I am working on with Yvette. Yes, this because it's so nice, and it's called it's a project I'm doing together with Yvette and another curator, Paula Nascimento, who did this very amazing Angolan pavilion in 2013 in Venice and won the Golden Lion for it. So the 3 of us are doing this project, Are You For Real? And it's a fully digital project, which can be understood as, let's say, a cultural experiment, looking for new ways of letting discourse and art come to life in an, I don't know, in the interactive and over the course of several months, constantly changing digital space. And it kind of fits into our thoughts at the end, as we've been thinking about the, quote unquote art space for a long time, to to have an art space on Contemporary End as a platform in which we could invite artists and curators to work on a project beyond visa restrictions, travel restrictions, etc. Because it's just easy to meet in this in a digital space. But we always try to find is another language to describe a space for art, or an art space, without perpetuating the boring idea of showing a white cube in a digital context. So that was something we definitely strongly wanted to overcome, but still haven't found a way how to describe a room where you want to show contemporary art. And of course, we're not alone with this task. I think every museum has, or they're all asking these questions right now. How can we show contemporary art, or art itself in a digital space? And the platform Are You For Real is inviting visual artists and poets, academics, coders, or filmmakers who are addressing the material and immaterial aspects of the digital, and how they are perceived from the perspectives of various disciplines. And maybe to just give you an idea here, are just some questions we'll ask ourselves in the frame of this project. Or maybe you can go to the next slide, and next one. Yeah, this is a piece I'm looking very forward to. The launch of the project is on the 10th of December, so very soon, and I can leave the website in the chat if you like. This is a room, an artist, Nushin Yazdani. She's an ethical designer and an artist, created for this project different rooms in which she invited critical feminist artists to artists, but musicians as well, to kind of build their ideal space to communicate with us as visitors. Can you go one? And these are the entrances to, for example, this is one world or room in which you can enter by one of these artists. And let me just finish with these questions we ask ourselves around this project. Realness exists on many levels and through different perspectives and temporalities. What is real about an entire continent, a country, or a person? When do things become real? Does a perspective become more real when it's reflected by media interests? Are privileged perspectives more real than others? Who can judge if something is real? Who is allowed to judge? Is there greater realness today because we can experience more perspectives online? So, yes. Yeah, so let me just, is there another, is this the last picture? I don't, yeah, no, then it's the last picture. Okay, so yeah, thanks so much for the moment. Yes, I think that was.
Thank you, Julia, for this inspiring presentation. And I think your the question you posed in the end are quite pressing for many of us in this very immediate situation, but also in general, I think. So what is realness, what is truth, what is fake and what not? But maybe before we get to the questions from the chat, I just wanted to get back to the very beginning of your talk when you said that museums and institutions, they tend, or there is this trend, so to say, to decolonize institutions, collections themselves. But on the other hand, you frequently collaborate with institutions that are that have colonial traces, that have these blanks in their collections, or even problematic issues in their collections, in their programs, and so on and so forth. So maybe you could elaborate a little bit on how you strategically approach these kind of collaborations. That would be really interesting.
Yes, yeah, it's interesting because this is something we talked, because we invited Nora to our seminar on museums last semester, or no, 2 semesters ago. And we talked about this because the students, the master students, because it's a master Studiengang as well, institute, and they asked her, like, but what should I do? Should I go inside the institution? Should I work against the institution from the outside? And she was, you know her very well. She was like, yeah, you can do everything at the same time. You can be inside the institution and work against the institution and be outside as well. You know, if you're Fred Moten, you would say, I'm inside the institution and work from it, get against it from the inside. But you know, Mora's more like you can do it from all sides. And this is a little bit how we do it as well, because we obviously are independent and do our own thing and work on our projects from the outside. But as well, as you say, we've been, I've been working in institutions, Yvette has been working inside institutions as well in the past. And when we work with institutions right now, like for example, the Museum Ludwig, or we work with the big museum right now on then one of, they have a big exhibition next year. And, the museums are super insecure about everything right now, yeah? In terms of how can we say this? What can we show? Can we show an exhibition by a Black person? What, where are the traps if we show it? How should we contextualize this? How do we describe this on the wall text? Everything is put in question right now, and there's big insecurity which we experience right now, because we get a lot of requests and requests from museums right now on a weekly basis, almost, like help calls almost. And what we always say is, of course, you know, if it fits, we work with them. For example, in this case of Museum Ludwig with the center, but always, obviously, for example, by going into their collection, yeah, into their book library, for example, and the Museum Ludwig has a huge library, and art historical library, and we always say, okay, of course you have problematic books in your collection, and they do have, you know, problematic, very cliche, stereotypical books on the typical German adventurer who goes to Namibia and comes back with a pile of big, you know, pictures with beautiful people on it, etc. And we show these books, and we kind of present, you know, the ugly sides of a museum as well. We don't try to hide them, etc. And this is, you know, the same which we do with HKW. The Transmediale team, for example, they weren't happy when we, you know, took out these, you know, old Dutch white man books and said, well, why these? And we said, yeah, you know, because it's part of your collection. And if you're open to if you want to say decolonize yourself and be open to really start institutional change, you know, you should at least start with, you know, presenting unpleasant details from, for example, your collection, etc. And what I think young artists should do, because, you know, the museums, you might need the museums, but the museums need you too. And you can always add demands on, so for example, an event you do with them. If they invite you, you can always say, okay, I can work with you, but, you know, I want you to realize a workshop on, I don't know, institutional racism as well, etc. And I think it's a good moment right now to demand these things, you know, things which would have been impossible like 10 years ago or 5 years ago, where everybody was like, oh, please, a young artist, let me, you know, my biggest goal is I finally have, you know, be part of a group show at the Museum Ludwig, etc. But now you can demand things, and it's just a great moment. And that's why, as I say, if we work with this institution, we always have this little catalog of, okay, we can do it, but we will do this, and we will do this, and we will do this. And it might be unpleasant, but if you don't want to do it, then you're not ready, because this is the easiest step. The hardest steps are, okay, you know, what about change that goes deeper, you know, what about the institutional, the structural change? Look at your look at your program team, you know, we just did not yours, but, you know, we just had a Zoom call with a big museum in Germany, and the curatorial and program team was entirely white, which is fine, but, you know, they said as well, of course, I look around, we're all white, so is this normal, or where is this the way to go? And obviously these are the harder steps who hurt, you know, because you have to look at the different areas, the institutional of an institution, no? The structures of an institution. You have to look at the Freundeskreis of a museum, you know, because this is really nasty. If you look at the Freundeskreise, they're very old and very wide. So there's, you know, the program is, let's say, the easiest part to claim, or to at least claim that you change. If you say, okay, look at our global program, we have five artists, or, you know, we have five exhibitions per year, and 3 of them have a focus on I don't know, decolonial or global topics, etc. This is still easy, but the question is who's running these programs, who's doing these exhibitions, you know, who comes up with these ideas. So it's
So it's a question of sustainable change, I guess. But this is also a process of many steps, I guess. So I don't know. I would like to open up also for questions from our audience. Please let us know if there are any, or in the chat, and Beatrice will bring them in.
The chat, there's just a note from Maren Bolt. She says it's very interesting, but she had to leave.
Well, no, we are not leaving yet.
There's not a question in the chat yet.
I see.
So you can also use the hand in the.
Yes.
You raise the hand, and maybe.
But maybe before
make the videos on.
Yes. So I would be also interested in how you decide on content for the magazine. So how is your decision process about what will be published, what not, where you put a focus on, where not? Because, you know, obviously so much is happening, so many exhibitions, so many artistic practices. So there must be, I don't know, a process of selection, I guess, and you mentioned your amazing network that probably plays into this. So it would be great to get to know more about this process.
Yeah. First of all, Yvette and myself, we're both art historians, so we're kind of strict, and we come from an, you know, we both come from a German trained or Western trained art background, if you like. And as I said, I had to unlearn many perceptions and concepts in my head, but still, of course, the question of what is good art is something we had to leave behind many years ago, and which is great. But still, maybe, I don't know, it's not our secret, but we're very selective in terms of what makes sense to present and not by any questions of quality, because this question doesn't exist, at least for us, when it comes to what is good or bad art, but more like what fits into the concept and discourse of our, or the concept of the discourses we're dealing with at the end. And then in a way it kind of naturally or organically fits in, you know, because the thing is, looking back, like 7 years ago, we had to really build and search for the network, and now the network is so big that we constantly get offers and pitches by writers who sit in I don't know, in Houston or in Accra in Ghana or in Nairobi, etc. And in a way, people have understood the way we're going and the language we're speaking. So it comes quite naturally now. So, but for example, we would never, I don't know, feature Olafur Eliasson just because he does a project in Nairobi or in, you know, in the savannah or something like this. That wouldn't fit really. Yeah, maybe that answers your question.
Yeah, but still, if you get like proposals from collaborators, you still have to decide, or do you just publish everything that is of interest to you? So I guess, you know, of course, you won't do something about Carsten Höller or Olafur Eliasson or Jeff Koons. I wouldn't expect that. That would be interesting choice, but. But do you do open calls for specific thematic contexts, or is it just that it's in the flow and in the process, and people that work with you already know? So just, you know.
Yeah, it's both. People who work with us obviously know the direction of our interest and, you know, on how we work and what, you know, what our discourses are. On the other hand, we say no to dozens of pitches, and because obviously there are many who are just not of interest for us because the concept is boring, or is, you know, and it doesn't matter if it comes from Africa or not. If it's boring, it's then, you know, then it doesn't interest us. And maybe that's the balance of that we obviously select, but as well. Topics come in by writers or people from the network who know how we work and what our focus or our interests is. We don't do open calls for writers or for topics, because there again we have this huge network of people who we can just ask, we do want to do something on I don't know, coding in the arts. Do you have someone in mind who could do something in these different areas? So, and that comes quite naturally. Yeah. So yes.
Sorry.
No problem. No problem.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Well, first of all, thank you for the really nice and interesting lecture and the presentation of your work. And I was, besides browsing through the online content, which is really interesting and very well presented, and you've mentioned publishing by the Institut für Auslandsbeziehungen and the support of the Federal Foreign Office, and also you have mentioned the troubles you are facing in certain countries, well, freedom of speech and the freedom of, yeah, say journalism or writing and expression. And I was wondering, first of all, how did you build up your, say, financial structure of financing your work to be able to act so freely and independently? How do you keep it up? And say from the beginning. And how do you deal with these kind of issues that you mentioned, like regarding restrictions, local restrictions, and other, say, obstacles or troubles?
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, the first aspect of the financing is obviously always the biggest topic behind the scenes. And as you mentioned already, we're funded by the state, the German state in this case. So we kind of financially not depending on, as you say, as I mentioned already, raising paywalls in order to get in, money. So the content doesn't cost anything thanks to the funding we're receiving by the Institut für Auslandsbeziehungen on a yearly basis for the last 7 years now. So this is kind of fixed. It's not a huge amount, but we can, as you see, we can work with this. But over the course of the years, and the IFA was the one who kind of gave us angel or initial funding as well to build the whole thing, yeah. And the Auswärtige Amt, so the Office of Foreign Relations as well. Foreign Affairs, sorry, pardon, Foreign Affairs. And obviously, because they are very interested in having obviously more, not only cultural, but economic relations with Africa as well, and interests with Africa. But having said that, because you asked about the freedom we have in creating what we do, this is something which is, in a way, we're extremely happy with, because the IFA leaves us all the freedom we can just imagine. So we can do whatever we want. We don't have to, if the foreign, the Außenminister, yeah, the Minister of Foreign Affairs travels to Angola, we don't have to cover anything. We don't have to cover that. We don't have to focus on German cultural political topics. We can literally do what we want, and this is a big help in order to do what we do, and helped us a lot to create what we did. Then these things, for example, like the center, this reading room, was something we just not invented, but came up with during the last years. And these things, for example, because it works, collaborates with these different museums, and through this we earn money as well, or Contemporary End earns money, because obviously it is like an artistic participation. We bring this, they invite us to show the center in the museum, and obviously we get a fee for this, and this fee flows into Contemporary End as well. So it's not a fee from me or for Yvette, but goes all into Contemporary End. And this kind of mix works very well, at least right now. And the other thing is, as I mentioned, with kind of offering protection for writers in sensitive sensitive areas, having to deal with censorship, etc. As I said, we again work with a big network of, in this case, NGOs and initiatives who really focus their work on artist safety, who, if it really gets serious, who can organize that the writers, for example, get like a safety or a safe space for a certain amount of time, let's say for 6 months outside that country, in another European country, for example, or somewhere safe, yeah. And these organizations we're working with, we never, thank God, had the situation where we had to do this or had to save someone and get him or her out of the country. But we obviously know of many cases of more like literature writers who came, into these very serious moments or situations where they these initiatives had to help them to get out of the country. So that's why, again, here as well, a network of supporters is super important, because yeah, there's a lot going on, but there's a big network of initiatives as well who work particular in these fields and have different expertises for different needs, let's say. So yeah. Timo, if that answered your question.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
A little bit.
So, are there any other questions from the audience? I don't see everybody here on the screen, so please just let me know. Otherwise, I would have one last question, because we're a bit running out of time, and we're trying, with this digital format to stick to the given time frame that we have, as it's also quite demanding on everybody. But my last question would be, as you just gave us a very short, small insight in all these different activities that you starting with the magazine, but also expanding to other fields. So I would be interested in where do you see contemporary and, like, in 5 years? What would be what do you envision for contemporary and in the near future? So you showed us this digital exhibition project. Does it go in this direction? So what would you envision for the near future for contemporary and?
Yeah, what we sometimes say is, ideally the ideal scenario would be that you wouldn't need a platform such as contemporary and in 5 years anymore. That would be the ideal scenario, because museums, cultural institutions, etc., would have, obviously, we're talking about long-term sustainable change. Would come to the point where you wouldn't separate between us and the others, between global art, but obviously we're not part of the global art world. We're the art world, and the global is the rest, right? So if we have kind of managed to overcome these categories and this thinking of within these categories, then obviously a platform such as the End, which tries to open discourse, but it's still, we have this focus. We have this focus, and we don't name it all the time. It's Africa, but still we have this focus, because there's still a need for a platform which creates kind of visibility and connects these voices, etc. Yeah, and ideally in 10 years you wouldn't need this kind of special place anymore. But if we look at shorter, like 3-4 years perspective, what we have in mind for the nearer future, what we want to or would love to invest in more is to create more sustainable structures in the different cities we're working with. Because we have, as I said, we have these people we've been working for the last 4, 5, 6 years in Lagos, in Nairobi, etc., and would love to create like hubs there, support hubs, like just like small office structures where you have a desk and internet and can just work, have a little structure where the different where you have one person we're working with, but youngster writers can kind of get the feeling that there's a a physical place where they can go and exchange and just have a place, yeah, and feel not safe, but just feel feel supported in a way, yeah. And this is something we want to try to work more or to focus more on. Of course, it costs money. That's why we're not there yet. And the other things are to expand even more in let's say in the field of the digital. That's what we've been doing already for the last maybe 2 years, and we're just starting a bigger project next year. So in January, over the course of 1 to 2 years, focusing on the aspect of education in a digital format by, let's say, inviting youngster coders slash artists to think about or to look into curricula in, for example, African art academies, who are still very influenced by European curricula and structures, etc., when it comes to knowledge, yeah, cultural knowledge. And the idea is that the youngster coders kind of what is it? Not code, create games and VR games and films around these topics of I don't want to say the word, but decolonial curriculums in Africa, in African educational systems, etc. So this is something we're working on from next year on. Yes.
Wow. Julia, thank you so much for your presentation. We will continue tomorrow with a group of ECM students. But for tonight, I really thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And I thank all the audience, everybody who joined us here on this platform. And we're looking forward to the next public talk, of course, that will be announced in due course. And for now, I think, I wish you all a very nice evening, and I hope to see you back very soon. Thank you.